In World War II, they wore the same uniform, fought under the same flag, and risked their lives for a freedom they were never given. They built the Cemetery of Heroes, the sacred ground where America's fallen rest. Yet their own story was buried for 80 years. Jefferson Wiggins stayed silent for 65 years, silent about what he saw, silent about what he buried, silent about the horrors that lived inside him from World War II. When he finally spoke, his story changed history. It led to a memorial that honored the forgotten black soldiers who built one of the most sacred cemeteries in Europe. And now, thanks to Donald Trump, that memorial is gone. The Netherlands American Cemetery at Margraten. His truth gave voice to the forgotten black soldiers who built it. And now, that truth has been erased. Margraten is hallowed ground. More than 8,300 American soldiers lie beneath its green fields, with another 1,300 names carved into the marble walls of the missing. These men fought and died liberating Europe during Operation Market Garden, the Battle of the Bulge, and the final drive into Germany. Since 1945, every single grave there has been adopted by a Dutch family. They bring flowers, research the soldier's story, and pass that duty from parent to child. Some families have honored the same grave for nearly 80 years. It is one of the most extraordinary traditions of remembrance in the world, but few visitors ever knew who built this cemetery. In November 1944, two segregated all-black units, the 961st and 3102nd Quartermaster Service Companies, arrived to prepare the ground. 260 men, armed not with rifles but with shovels. They found thousands of bodies waiting for burial. The earth was frozen. There were no coffins, only mattress covers. Day after day they dug by hand, 6 feet deep, in bitter cold and endless rain. By the end, they had buried more than 20,000 men. Among them was First Sergeant Jefferson Wiggins, just 19 years old. He later recalled that no one spoke while they worked. Some prayed, some cried quietly. One soldier, James Parks, would sing a spiritual after every burial, standing at attention and saluting the fallen. The work broke them, and the silence became their armor. When the war ended, Wiggins buried those memories too. Deep inside, where no one could reach them, he stayed silent for 65 years. Of the 8,301 soldiers buried at Margraten, 172 were African American, nearly 1 in 8. For decades, their service was invisible. Then in 2009, Dutch historian Mieke Kirk found Wiggins, the last surviving member of the 961st. She persuaded him to share his memories. That single act of courage uncovered an entire hidden chapter of history. It inspired the Black Liberators project, new research, books, and documentaries. For the first time, the Dutch learned that the cemetery they had cherished for generations had been built by black Americans who faced segregation, even as they honored their fallen white comrades. In 2024, after years of advocacy, the truth was finally recognized. 2 memorial panels were installed in Margraten's Visitor Center, described as part of a permanent exhibition. The first panel told the broader story, that over 1 million African Americans served in World War II, fighting 2 wars at once, one against fascism abroad and another against racism at home. It acknowledged how many were confined to service roles, not because of ability, but because of color. It also honored those in the most painful duty of all, burying the dead. The second panel told the story of one man, George H. Pewitt, a telephone engineer with the 3102nd. He survived the war, endured the cold, and lived through the liberation. Then, 1 month after victory in Europe, tragedy struck. When a fellow soldier fell into a river, Pewitt jumped in to save him. Both men drowned. His death, an act of pure selflessness, became a symbol of the quiet heroism of black liberators. The panels were celebrated. Dutch families visited to read them. Historians praised them. Veterans groups called them long overdue. They gave voice to men who had been erased for 80 years. And then, in 2025, they disappeared. Without warning, without announcement, both panels were removed. Dutch newspaper NRC broke the story on November 7th. The American Battle Monuments Commission, the U.S. agency that manages overseas cemeteries, gave no clear reason. Officials claimed one panel was part of a rotating exhibit, but the other, the one describing segregation and discrimination, was also gone. No one was told. No one was asked. The timing raised alarm. The panels had been installed under the Biden administration and removed under Trump shortly after a complaint from the Heritage Foundation. This conservative think tank, one of the most powerful in the U.S., had accused the commission of violating Trump's new executive order that banned all diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in federal agencies. The order forced departments to erase anything that mentioned systemic racism or segregation. Within weeks, the Commission's Diversity Office was dissolved, its DEI content deleted, and the Margraten panels quietly taken down. But the panels weren't political. They told facts, hard, documented truths. It is a fact that the U.S. Army was segregated in World War II. It is a fact that black soldiers built the Margraten cemetery and buried over 20,000 dead. It is a fact that George Puett died trying to save another man's life. None of this is controversial to historians. But in Trump's America, acknowledging racism has been redefined as divisive. The backlash in the Netherlands was immediate. C.O. Bovens, chairman of the Black Liberators Foundation, himself a conservative, condemned the removal. 11 political parties across the Limburg province joined together, demanding the panel's return. They called for a temporary memorial until the originals could be restored. Local families who had adopted the soldiers' graves felt betrayed. "We keep their memory alive," one Dutch caretaker said, "but America has chosen to forget them." And as this truth was being silenced, the Trump administration did something else. It ordered the return of the Confederate monument at Arlington National Cemetery. That monument depicts enslaved people as loyal and content, a racist fantasy of history. So while panels honoring black soldiers who fought fascism were taken down, a statue glorifying the Confederacy was put back up. History was being rewritten in real time, not to reveal truth, but to protect power. The Commission insists it was routine exhibit rotation, but that's a lie. The panels were officially designated as permanent. There was no schedule for removal, no replacements, and no public notice. What happened wasn't maintenance, it was censorship. And now, the visitors who walk through Margraten see clean marble and trimmed grass, but no trace of the men who built it. No mention of Wiggins or Parks or Puett. The truth they uncovered has been buried again. Jefferson Wiggins died in 2013. He carried his memories for a lifetime, finally breaking his silence so history would never forget what his men endured. For a brief moment, the truth was honored. For a brief moment, their story stood in the sunlight. And now, under the weight of politics, it has been stripped away. But history doesn't die that easily. You can tear down panels, but you can't erase courage. You can silence stories, but not memory. The men of the 961st and 3182nd Quartermaster Service Companies will not be forgotten. Not by the Dutch families who still bring flowers to their graves. Not by the historians who uncovered their truth. Not by anyone who believes that remembering is an act of resistance. Donald Trump may try to silence them, but he will never stand where they stood. They fought fascism. He fueled it. They built memorials. He destroyed them. He dodged the draft. They dug graves for freedom. One day, his name will fade. Theirs never will. This is the silence at Margraten, and we will never let it fall silent again.